And do you think it's easier in like a science fiction environment where you're creating the world that they're going to inhabit, because you can make sure that nobody around them thinks it's a big deal?
Right.
And that kind of, if people, if they can feel that you're hesitant or nervous about how something's going to come across, they often will latch onto that and start to give you their 2 cents, right?
Yeah, having a sci-fi world where you, yes, absolutely, that's helpful if you want to treat it as a non-issue and you want to sort of go like, look how nice the world looks when the culture has developed like this. That's sci-fi is absolutely perfect for that. That's like the definition of what sci-fi was put on the planet to do. But if you want to write something in a realistic world, yeah, you're probably going to have to address it, and it's just nice that lots of shows are now addressing it in lots of different ways.
I think it's the same in any minority group that's represented in television or film. Like, talk to the Asian American community, the Latino community. Like, they go through the same struggles. It's still, you know, Margaret Cho, her whole stand-up act is about like being on the forefront of that, and how like she hadn't seen, you know, Asian American people in prominent roles on television, and
We're only in certain roles.
Exactly, and I mean, even now, you can still, there's not that many, and so I think it's a struggle that not just LGBT community goes through, it's any sort of minority that is being represented in the media.
And when you come to it as a writer or an artist at the same time, and you do have a little bit of an agenda yourself, like to put these things into the world and express these things, you also don't want to be guilty of tokenism. Like, I'm just putting it in there, it doesn't serve any purpose except, you know,
Like a
hey,
placeholder.
Yeah, hey, this is normal, guys, you know, but if you're doing it just for that reason, and it doesn't serve the story, then that, you know, then that's transparent too, and people will call you on that.
I will say, as an actor going on auditions, and you get the character descriptions can be so wildly offensive and horrible, and like.
Oh, come on, you have to say at least one.
God, I mean, just like, I mean, a lot of times I get one that's like, quirky guys, not too ugly, must have decent teeth. So like, this is what we're working with, and you know,
this is the state of art.
They don't handle the gay situation very well. It's like, you know, sometimes they'll say like, you know, please send slightly fey or slightly effeminate. Like, there's no easy way to go about doing it. And sometimes, you know, you'll be in a room like, you know, can you gay it up? Or can you know, there's no, it's hard to give them what they want.
Can you gay it up?
So yeah, but you know, there's a range. I don't know. It's such a issue to tiptoe around, because like I've not ever booked the role of sassy fashion designer or bitchy hairstylist, and I think that because essentially what it comes down to casting, you really, unless it's like a sketch show or something, you really want someone whose energy is of that thing that you're looking for, and that they're honestly going to do it. And I think I do have friends that are that character in real life, and they will book that job over me, and that's fine, because I think they are able to represent that.
Do you think partly it's actually more of a fault of the scope of the person who's writing, perhaps?
I think it's now
they can't get past this idea of a placeholder or an idea of a character as opposed to a person.
Yeah, I think now that like there is the token gay character on all of these shows, and there's a lot of like, for lack of a better term, like bros doing the writing or creating. I don't know. I think maybe that's their idea of like what they've seen, what the gay. Yeah. So I don't know.
There are more and more gay showrunners though, and I do see it getting better.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Ryan Murphy.
Ryan Murphy, absolutely. Russell Davis at Torchwood. So I think a lot of the programs, like I got into writing through the Disney Writers Fellowship, which is specifically about getting underrepresented groups into writing. And I think in the last 20 years, those groups have actually, I've seen an impact. I've seen more diversity of all kinds on writing staffs. So that's what's going to really help. That's what's going to do it. But yeah, that lags behind the general public, I think, just because you're right. There has been such a tradition of straight white men in the writers' room that it's going to take a little longer. But like the car has momentum now, and it's like, there's momentum.
So what are the different challenges inherent in doing LGBT characters in comics versus television and film?
I know one thing that was interesting for me was when Willow and Tara, kissed on the show. I believe we'd already had them kiss in the comic, and we didn't really think about it that much. And it happened relatively easily in the comic. Nobody cared, or nobody reacted too much. And I think there's something different seeing drawn characters do it than to see flesh and blood doing it. And I think that maybe on the show you guys put that off for a while, right? Like the relationship was there for a little while before it was on.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I no longer remember. It's too long ago to remember if that was Joss going like, let's build suspense, or if that was the network going like, let's keep that as late as we can. I don't remember why, but yeah, I think you're right. It did take a while.
Yeah, and the decision to do it in the book, there wasn't much handwritten.
That was written in time as that.
Yeah, and I think there's less reason to be afraid of that. I think also though that like there's a but I guess both of them have their history of ad presentations or really carelessly or phobic presentations being done, so that's something that taken into consideration, I guess, differently, but in both fields.
Well, it's something I'm thinking about now is that you don't have a layer of executives above you saying, no, you can't do this, so you have more freedom probably than you do.
That was the funny thing, like I may have said this last year on this panel, but the panel I was on rather, when we decided that Buffy and Saxon were going to kiss in the book, it was Joss and Drew who came up with that, and her daughter, and we knew that was coming, and the book got drawn, the book got lettered and everything, it was about to go out the door, and I was like, did we tell Fox about this? And I was in a marketing meeting where we were like, okay, we got to make sure that we're ready to react when the public gets the comic. And then suddenly I'm like, did we tell Fox? And I just was like, oh no, they could totally freak out about this. They could say no.
I didn't know that they had that power.
Oh yeah. They have it, but they don't exert it. They're very.
So do they own the property even in
Yeah, Fox owns the whole thing outright, but because Joss is so involved in the comic, they just like, whatever Joss wants to do. But this was one time where I thought, maybe they're going to have an opinion on this. And then they didn't. They were fine. But there was that moment of like, maybe the executives are suddenly going to notice, maybe they're suddenly going to say, we think this franchise is worth too much to...
Do they have to sign off on the comic?
Yeah. But it's a totally fluid process at this point.
I was still writing in sitcoms when like the first TV kisses were, not the very first was like All in the Family or something, sort of these joke kisses. But when the first one started happening on sitcoms, there was one on Roseanne, and of course on Ellen.
Were you on Ellen?
I was on Ellen. I was on the last year of Ellen, the post coming out year of Ellen, which was I think the same year Will and Grace started. And so they were just dealing with this, and there was sort of a rule that was explained to me when I was a young writer, which was, yeah, the networks will let you get away with having a girl kiss a girl once, but if it happens twice, it means she liked it. So that was the line. The line was
only bad kissers are allowed.
But the line wasn't between 0 and 1 kisses. The line was between 1 kiss and 2 kisses. And that seems to have gone away.
And on Roseanne, wasn't it like she bumped into her or something?
It was like it was presented as part of the tag or something, or it was in some way presented as not real. So they were, there was all sort of, it was a lot of winking.
So can you pinpoint anything about the Buffyverse? Can you pinpoint anything about the Buffyverse that kind of lends itself to more inclusiveness? Because it definitely seems like a show and a book and a series of books that are much more inclusive, sexualities and races and species and whatever. Is there something kind of at its core that, regardless of who's writing it or who's doing it, that kind of lends itself to that?
It's a feminist work. It's a work about a girl who is maybe challenged as a leader for a lot of reasons, but not because she's a girl. And I think once once that's at the center of your show, it's hard not to have that extend to anyone else. Should be challenged only for cause and not for some inherent thing about them.
And I think, you know, even if you were, you know, back before you couldn't tell a gay story on television, if you were telling a story about outsiders, it's like you could secretly be telling these stories and telling what you wanted in the disguise of these other things, because it's about outsiders. And so anyone that they themselves is part of one of those groups can then relate. So the fact that it can start as this group of outsiders and then expand and then even include you know, these themes for minorities and gay and lesbian, and then have like the best writers ever like heading up those storylines. Like it's so great. Like I don't know, it's just very inspiring.
That's a really good point. Yes, outsiders, and particularly in a science fiction world where you go, you know, this being feels excluded. Well, who's that supposed to stand for? Sci-fi is wonderful for doing things coded. You know, Battlestar Galactica was all, you know, it's sort of Gulf War all in code, and so you can say things more emphatically that way than if you were just telling good stories.
There's definitely a saying that like the truest form of storytelling is fiction, because you can do that. You can get rid of people's baggage about what you're talking about and get to the heart of what you're trying to say.
Right.
But also the genre stuff, the genre trappings of Buffy become metaphor for like really intense emotional things. It's like you were saying, the way that you can get at these very personal emotional issues is through the fun elements of genre. And so at first you're using genre to stand in for the emotional core, but the emotional core of the stories gets more and more like on the surface and out front. And so like Willow's development, the development of her relationship with Tara, used magic to represent something, and then it became something else. You know, it felt more on the nose about the relationship between them and how much they shared.
It went from magic to magic.